Hey everyone, it's Konrad Bobilak here, CEO of Investors Prime Real Estate and author of Australian Property Finance Made Simple. And welcome to today's video. And I want to talk to you about a very interesting topic, which is why the millennials are completely screwed when it comes to real estate ownership in Australia in 2018 and, well, let's face it, beyond. The reason for that is obvious. The Australian property market, especially in the major capital cities, has outperformed everyone's expectations in the last 10 years. And people that got into the market, especially Melbourne and Sydney in 2004, 5 and 6, have made an absolute killing. In fact, most properties have doubled, if not tripled, in the major capital cities. Now that's created a really good outcome for property owners and property investors, but it's created a big dilemma for young people trying to get into the market. And a lot of them, unfortunately, will never be able to get into the market, which is really unfortunate because, you know, Australia is such a great country. And one of the reasons it's such a great country is because everyone's kind of on the same level playing field. You know, there is a huge middle class. We've got one of the biggest middle classes in the world in Australia, over 70%. So everyone gets along really well. We haven't got that class distinction like we have in Europe, for example. So this video is really designed to cover the problem, which is, you know, there's a whole generation of young people that will become permanent renters and they will never have a backyard, they'll never have a house. That's obvious, but more importantly, the reason I'm making this video is to give you some solutions. So if you are in that generation, if you are part of the millennial demographic or generation, if you like, or any other generation, I don't care if you're a baby boomer or an X-gen like myself, this will be a very important video for you to listen to because I'm going to give you 3 really good solutions whereby you can get into the property market in Melbourne and Sydney with very little money down. And these strategies are not some theoretical strategies. This is stuff I'm doing every day with my clients. So I'm going to show you some examples and extremely specific structures of what you can do today to get into the property market. So stay tuned and watch the video to the very end because this could be really a life-changing video for you, especially if you're one of those people that can't get into the property market because you don't make enough money or you haven't got a big enough deposit to get into the property market. Bit of a company disclaimer, everything that I'm talking about today is theoretical in nature only. This is not specific advice. I've never met you, I don't know your situation. So this is just general advice. Personal disclaimer, guys, I'm not here to tell you that you're going to become a multi-millionaire property investor. There's no guarantees in life. Life is full of risks, and just because you do something doesn't mean you're going to get any results. Just like joining a gym. Just because you get a gym membership doesn't guarantee that you're going to transform your body and become strong or become a bodybuilder. It takes work, dedication, and perseverance to become successful, like in any industry. And property investing is the same as any other industry out there. So what you're going to learn today is, number one is, we're going to explore the exact reason behind this generation, these millennials who are completely screwed when it comes to entering the property market, and why has that happened as a phenomenon, because it's the first time this has really happened in Australian history. But you know, more importantly, we're going to look at the solution, because I'm not here just to make a video and say, "Hi, you guys can't get into the property market, tough." I want to give you real solutions that you can implement, and I want to give you a very broad, general kind of understanding of who you can use to implement these strategies, and I want to go into the strategies in a lot of detail as well. So for a lot of you, this could really be a life-changing video. I mean, I know a lot of clients that I'm working with right now, especially with my accountant, my lawyer, my mortgage broker. We've got them into properties where they've given up on the notion of ever owning a property. They literally were at the point where they've just settled for, you know, no ownership at all, and just, you know, happy to rent and travel for the rest of their life, you know, rather than having any ownership. Now, for some people, ownership is not important. If ownership is not important for you, don't watch this video because it's not relevant to you. This is only for people who definitely want to own their own property and get into their house, and then after that start building a large property portfolio. For some of you, you just want to have one property and that's it, which is cool as well. This video is definitely applicable for you as well. So the 3 strategies I'm going to go into is, number one is how you can actually borrow 100% of the purchase price via a combination of 10% personal loan or 20% personal loan, and then get a loan for 90-95%, which covers your entire stamp duty, legals, everything on the purchase. So the easiest way to get into the market is just to borrow 100%. Now, we do that every day with clients. I was just speaking to a client who's a dentist this morning on my way to work, And his problem was he's a brand new dentist, just started working. He's got a very high income of about $150,000 per year, but he had no deposit saved. So what we did, we set up a unsecured line of credit through ANZ against his practice for $200,000, and the $200,000 he could use as a deposit to get into his property, and he purchased a property in Bentley, which is a townhouse for $900,000. So that's a really good outcome for the dentist, because he thought he had to stay in his job for 3 or 4 years and save a deposit before he could get into the property market. Now, 3 or 4 years and 150 grand, that guy would have been paying 60 grand in tax per year. So imagine that over 4 years, you're paying 4 times $60,000. I mean, that's 240 grand in tax. What a waste, you know, not knowing one key distinction, not knowing one strategy. So I'm going to elaborate on this strategy in detail. I'll show you how this works. Number 2, I'm going to go through how to instantly boost your borrowing capacity through the use of joint ventures, which simply means joining forces with a business partner, friends or family for most of you, and putting them together through a trust, and then pulling your serviceability or your equity together in order to get into a property. This is a really good strategy for young people who have parents with a lot of equity, and then you can use that equity to buy your first investment property. Now, having said that, I'll show you the exact way to structure that. You can't just ask your parents for it. You got to present them with a business opportunity. And I want to show you exactly what that means and what information you need to give them. Otherwise, if you just go to them and say, "Mom, can I get 200 grand? No. Oh, come on. No. All right then, damn." Okay, if that's your approach, you're going to fail. You need to become a business person with a business proposal, and I'll show you exactly what documentation you need in order to become successful in that strategy. Number 3 is I'm going to talk about vendor finance from the developer or builder, which is a very little known strategy that exists and people are doing it every day. We've done many of these deals with developers and builders, and I'll talk about what that means. But basically, the deposit is financed by the developer builder, so you've only going to come up with 80% or 90% of the purchase price. Let's have a look at the different generations before we get into the millennials and talk about why they are so disadvantaged compared to the others. So we have the greatest generation, born between 1901 and 1924, and these guys were the greatest because they were just there. World War I, the Great Depression, they went through a lot. Then we had the silent generation from 1924 to 1945, and this generation really were the generation that did it really tough. I mean, they were there through Second World War, where basically most of countries around the world were struggling, especially in Europe. Europe was bankrupt and in ruins. So, you know, these guys are called the silent generation. They just don't talk. They just kind of sit there and they just take in all the pain and they internalize the pain and just hold it in until they just snap. Then we have the baby boomers, who are getting blamed for everything. 1946 to 1964. So when the soldiers came back from the Second World War, we had the biggest birth of babies at any time in the world's history. We had 1 billion babies born after the Second World War, which has never happened since. And I don't think it's going to happen again unless we have a third world war, which let's hope not. But those baby boomers really make and break markets. And if you were smart in the 50s and 60s, if you had businesses that would target those baby boomers, like for example, when there were babies, Mattel and all those companies, Gerber, baby food, they were making a killing because those babies were consuming a huge amount of food and clothing. And then you look at when they went into their teens, the toy companies made a killing. So if your business is targeting the front of that baby boomer generation, and Robert Kiyosaki likens them to a basketball traveling through a garden hose. So if your business is targeting the front end of the baby boomer generation, even if you're average, you're gonna make a killing. If your business is targeting the back end, even if you're exceptional, you're probably going to lose your money in your business very soon. So that's a huge cluster of demographics that's moving through. And whatever they do really makes or breaks markets. So that's a very important demographic. Then we have Generation X, which is 1965 to 1976, which is my generation, which was kids that grew up in the 80s, riding around in BMX bikes and eating dirt and getting injured and getting into trouble. This is before computers came out. So this is just, where kids were still out there talking to kids and communicating to people and getting into trouble. And then you have the millennials. Generation Y, which is 77 to 95. And these are the kids that are in trouble because really they've missed the boat on the whole property market in Australia, especially Melbourne and Sydney. And then you got the Generation Z, which is 1996 onwards, which is a very interesting generation. Let's see what happens to them. These guys are exceptionally skilled, and they're growing up in a world that's so technology reliant that it's scary. So we'll see what happens to them in the future as they progress through the teens and the 20s and 30s. Here's an interesting observation about the different types of demographics that there are. Before we get into the real estate market, you can see that the baby boomers, they're really, if you look at the whole generation, they're very important because they really were the industry pioneers. And let's face it, they're the oldest people living right now anyway. So if you look at the majority of CEO positions and executive positions out there in the biggest corporations in America and Australia, and in Australia, the whole industry is based on the banking and financial services sector, which is the biggest contributor towards the GDP. They hold majority of positions in the banking sector. And then the second most important sector in Australia is the mining sector and the commodities exporting sector. And they also hold the majority of CEO and executive positions in those companies. They were really the pioneers of Australia. They've built Australia up from zero to where we are today. So they're the most important part of our demographic in terms of what they did. They've started the biggest companies and brands in the world. And they're really, it's a very interesting generation. You can see that the executive presence is 66%. The revenue is not the highest. My generation is creating the most revenue, which I'll talk about in a second. Very low in adaptability, though. They've kind of missed the whole tech generation, the tech wave. They're very tech, not savvy with technology at all. Most of them fear change, and they don't want to change at all. For example, one of those things is Warren Buffett, for example, which is the most successful investor of all time. He's very anti-cryptocurrency, and he's refusing to kind of acknowledge that the blockchain technology is going to change a lot of industries. So adaptability is not the strength there. Cost effectiveness is definitely a strength because they grew up with parents from the Depression era. So they're very cost conscious and they're very budget conscious people. Technology is not their strength. Relationship building is okay, 34%. Problem solving is not a big issue for them as well. And collaboration, which is working with others, is also not a strength. Then we have Generation X, 1963 to 1980. Managerial skills, revenue generation, problem solving. So we have executive presence is very low because they're around the 35 to 42-year-old. So they're still coming up in the ranks. Revenue generating, that is the generation that's creating majority of revenue right now in Australia. Adaptability, they're very adaptable. They embrace change because my generation grew up just on the brink of computers coming into the fold. I mean, I remember when there was no Google. I remember when floppy disks were floppy. I remember when email just came into being. So Outlook got launched, and I remember using Outlook for the first time. I remember when there was no internet. I remember when the internet just literally got launched, and I was using Alta Vista and Hotbot as a search engine. It was craziness. But we could see from I know what it was like without computers and iPhones, and then now I know what it's like to use them. So that adaptability is really a key strength of this generation because I've seen the before and after effect. Cost effectiveness, not really conscious, not really cost effective generation. We're tech savvy. We're not as good as the young generation. I mean, millennials have grown up in this whole technology era, so that's their strength. I mean, there's 12-year-olds building apps, selling them for $500 million to Microsoft. I mean, it's craziness. The key strength that the Generation X have is building relationships, and this is where the new generation has no idea. A lot of industries, a lot of success out there will be based on your ability to build relationships. And let's face it, majority of wealth in Australia currently is held by the baby boomers. So if you know how to build a relationship with the baby boomers, you're going to succeed. The problem is the gap is so great between the two generations here, the three generations, that the young generation, the millennials, don't know how to build relationships with baby boomers who have all the money and all the assets. And that's a very, very, it's It's not a good thing, because if you don't know how to build relationships and problem solve without relying on Google, and you don't know how to collaborate people around you, because kids these days don't know how to talk. They have lost the skill of the conversation. They don't know how to write essays. You know, they've never studied the classic textbooks that I have studied at school. I mean, we used to do Shakespeare and write essays, and yeah, it was a waste of time. Everyone complained, but we were forced to do it. We were forced to have conversations. We were forced to rely on pen and paper rather than computers to write reports. And the unfortunate thing about this young generation is they don't know how to relate to people well, because everything now is based online. All the relationships are basically online. And that's the reason, one of the reasons, apart from the market going through the roof, that's one of the reasons why these guys, the millennials, born between 1980 and 95, have a very difficult time structuring joint ventures and giving business proposals to really the baby boomers who have all the money and all the equity. So what we're going to do today is talk about how to help these guys talk to these guys to get some of the money from these guys so these guys can get into the property market, and also talk to Gen Xers as well, which are kind of in the middle. The strength of these guys is that really this whole world will be run by these guys eventually, which is a bit of a scary thought, because really they need to step up, especially with problem solving and relationship building. The tech savviness is not an issue. I mean, they own that space completely. Now, before we go on, just a bit about myself. If you don't know my background, I'm not going to spend a long time on this, but my background is very structured. I've wasted 4 years at Monash University doing a business degree. I'm a real estate agent, a mortgage broker, and I've got a diploma of financial planning. But more importantly, I'm also a property investor, and this is really the only reason I'm talking to you guys today. I'm a property investor in Melbourne right now, buying and selling real estate. So this really is the only thing that gives me the qualification to talk to you guys. I'm also the author of Australian Property Finance Made Simple, which is just about to go bestseller. You can get a copy of any bookshop, Amazon, or bookonfinance.com.au, and it sells for around $29.95 to $32.95. Really good book if you want to learn about finance and how to pay off your mortgage in record time. Now, so let's talk about this issue. And this is the problem, is these guys are completely priced out of the market. And this is just a mathematical fact. You know, it's not that it's something that was designed that way to punish the generation. It just kind of happened. And where we are today, you know, in terms of 2018, if you look at Melbourne, the Melbourne median house price is $813,000 and 64. Let's just call it $813,000. To buy into a Melbourne property with a 20% deposit, you need $206,467, which covers your deposit, stamp duty and legals. You need it up front. And in order to avoid income mortgage stress, you need to have an income per household, combined or individual, of $131,000. Now, mortgage stress is when a person or a couple spend more than 30% of their income after taxes towards mortgage repayments. So there's a study that shows that if your mortgage repayments are less than 30% of your income, you won't experience mortgage stress. And mortgage stress really comes into being when there's a recession or when interest rates are very high. In Sydney, it's even worse. I mean, Sydney median price now is really $1 million. It's $998,000. And you need 240 grand, $250,000, right? Just have a think about that for a second. How can a young person save $250,000? Just think about that concept. I mean, it's not going to happen. It's impossible, you know. Who do you know in your life that has saved? Forget about, you know, $250,000, 50 grand or 10 grand. I mean, people can't save anything in Australia. $250,000, well, that's a lifetime of saving, you know. And they need 161,000 combined income. You know, and then the most important two markets, you could look at Brisbane, for example, is the next one down, which is 538,000. You need 115,000 and 87. See, that's much more manageable to save. So really, you know, and look, Hobart's pretty good. I mean, I love Hobart. I think it's such a pretty town. You know, Tassie's excellent. I mean, the first time I went to Tassie, I just went, wow, this is amazing. I mean, it was just like the environment, it's green, beautiful properties, especially those overlooking the waterfront. You know, so just amazing area. Look at that, you know, your median price is $456,000 for a house, $107,000 upfront costs and 75 grand per year. That sounds fine. I can tell you now, most people in Australia will never save $107,000. And by the time you save that money, the market would have moved up, even higher. So the challenge we have now is people can't get into the market because of two things: serviceability based on their income and the amount of deposit money they need to get into the market. And that's why this whole new generation now is going to eventually shift from living in houses into apartments. But if you look at apartments, even in Melbourne, you're looking at 560 grand for a two-bedder, and you need $113,000, let's say $114,000 and $92,000 in income. Who's going to save 114 grand? I mean, it's impossible to save. In Sydney, forget about it, 750 grand for a two-bedder, 178,000 deposit, and 121,000 income. People in Sydney can't buy anything. I mean, they're literally getting displaced and they're moving out or becoming renters full time. I mean, Melbourne's just on the brink of that happening, and even with apartments, I mean, we're selling really good apartments in Glen Iris and places like that. One bedders are going for $650. Two bedders are going for $850 to $950 in the best suburbs in Melbourne. That's literally, I remember when houses were $180,000 in Bentley. I mean, it's incredible. So what's happening is, as the market keeps going up and up and up, the requirements to get into the market are becoming so high and the obstacles are becoming so great. You've got a whole new generation that will actually not even know what it's like to own a house. And the most unfortunate thing is, and this is where I really feel sorry for kids, is the kids that are growing up in balconies around Australia instead of a backyard. I grew up in a suburb where everyone had a 30-acre block, and my childhood years were spending kicking the footy around and playing cricket in the backyard, getting in trouble, and then being on the BMX bike, for the rest of the time. That was my whole childhood, getting injured, eating dirt, falling over. I was injured virtually every second day. I was bleeding or something was bruised, right? And no one cared that back then, you'll be fine, We didn't have the helicopter parents of these days. Oh my God, she's fallen over, quick, call the ambulance. We're just getting injured all the time. But we grew up in the backyard. Now kids are growing up in balconies, which is really unfortunate for those kids. They're going to miss out on amazing experiences that can't be replicated. So the skyrocketing cost of property over the past decade has seen the so-called Great Australian Dream slip away from many young people. It's going to be virtually impossible for them to own a home. In fact, the latest studies from the Household Income and Labour Demographics in Australia, called HILDA, survey show the ownership rates among Australians aged 18 to 39 have plunged to only 25%. I mean, that is the latest figures from 2018. That is super unfortunate. So, what's the solution? What can we do to get some of these people back into the property market, into the ownership, and having that great Australian dream of owning a home? Now, it's not going to be the 30-acre block, because let's face it, 30-acre blocks don't even exist anymore in Melbourne and Sydney. But you can at least buy something with 400 or 500 square metres worth of land. So the question is really, how do you buy property with very little or no money down? And this is the three strategies that I want to talk to you about today that you can implement and use. The number one is the simplest strategy, and this is going to be either you're talking to a broker, and they'll tell you whether you can do this or not very quickly, because it's based on mathematics and your serviceability. And it's obtaining a combination of personal loan and a residential loan to borrow 100 or 105% of the purchase price. So let me just show you how this works. It's super simple. We do this all day long with clients. I've done this especially with dentists, doctors, GPs, architects, engineering people. Yes, your income has to be a little bit higher than the norm. Okay, the average income in Victoria at the moment is $78,000. You probably need to be around 110, 130, but it is possible for a lot of people. The lowest use of your time as an individual is to save money for a deposit. If you can create a deposit or manufacture the deposit in the deal, you're going to be in the property faster, which means you're building wealth sooner, you're getting that property and that equity compounding, and more importantly, you're saving money on tax. So the easiest way is to do this is to borrow 100 or 105%. This can be achieved by a combination of 10% personal loan and 90 to 95% residential loan, equating to 100 or 105% of the purchase price. There are still lenders out there offering 95% LVR plus lender's mortgage insurance capitalised. Now, this is done through the same lender at the same time. This is not done through separate lenders. Sometimes we have done it through separate lenders. So, for example, one of my clients I mentioned before, he's using ANZ for the unsecured line of credit against his practice, and he's going to be using some other lender for his property settlement when it happens next year. Most lenders do not need evidence of genuine savings or proof of origins of deposit. I should say many lenders. So there are still low doc loans available out there as well. As long as you meet the lender's serviceability criteria, which is the DSR ratios, which my book talks about, you'll be able to get a loan which is 105% finance, which is a combination of two loans stacked together to enter into the property market. And this is how it works. Basically, if you're buying a property for $500,000, you get a personal loan, $50,000, which is 10% deposit. Now that loan is usually structured as principal and interest over 5 years. So you do have higher repayments to make. And then you get a residential loan for 90%, which is $450,000. Or if you're really good, if you're in an industry like accounting or the medical field, or architecture or engineering, you can potentially go 95, which means you're borrowing 475,000, which means the combined two, and this is interest only, by the way, this is principal and interest over 5 years. This is 25 to 30 years interest only, which is now only 5 years, by the way, and you can roll over for another 5 years. So this becomes 500,000 at 90% or 525 at 95%, which means it covers your entire costs of your property purchase price. And in this example at 95 covers your stamp duty and legals as well. By the way, I'm releasing a video in a few weeks talking about how to buy property also where the developer pays for your stamp duty. So stay tuned for that video as well for those of you who are interested in buying properties where you've just got enough for a deposit, or you can borrow money for a deposit, but you can't pay the stamp duty, because there's another video that I'm releasing talking about that as well. And this is what happens. So you have a residential loan of 90 to 95% and you get a pre-approval. You've got a 10% personal loan, same lender or two separate lenders, and you get this in writing from your mortgage broker basically. You go to your solicitor, you set up a trust account or buy the property in your own name, and then which effectively gives you 100% of the loan, and then you pay the deposit to the developer solicitor's trust account and you settle the property. Developer gets 100% of the purchase price. So it's a very simple way of basically structuring a transaction where you're virtually borrowing all the money. Guys, if you can do this, this is the best way to do it. And yes, you might not be able to get a new car. You might have to drive a second-hand car for a while, but I will do this first before I buy anything else. It's always easy to get a car once you have a property, but it's very difficult to buy a property if you have a car loan, because car loans destroy your serviceability, and especially credit cards, personal loans and car loans. So I would recommend you get into property first and then get the car loan and your personal loan, your credit cards. That's simple to do. The hardest thing to do is get a mortgage to buy a property. Strategy number 2, creating a joint venture with friends or family to buy a property together. Now, when people come to me and say, Konrad, I'm about to do a joint venture with my best friend, I always say to them, don't you like your best friend anymore? Because a lot of this stuff ends up in a big legal shit fight and everyone hates each other at the end. Now, you can part ways with your friends, but you can't get rid of your family, unfortunately. So be careful who you joint venture with. Make sure the person is not only compatible with you because they've got cash or serviceability, you got to make sure they have the right temperament, the right psychology for joint ventures. Because if anything happens, if they're a complicated person, you know what I'm talking about, people that are just hard to do anything, or they complicate things that are simple, like making a restaurant reservation or going for a holiday together. If they complicate the shit out of simple things in life, do not joint venture with them, because this is going to be one of the biggest things you're going to do with them, and your life will become hell. Okay, so a bit of a warning. Not talking from experience here, I'm talking from experience of other clients. I don't do joint ventures with people. I never had a need to, but I'm a big fan of it as long as it's done with the right people. That's what I'm saying. If it's done with the wrong people, it's not a good thing. So what is it exactly? It's a simple way to instantly boost your borrowing capacity through the use of a joint venture, which is simply joining forces with a business partner, friend or a family, and pulling your resources together. The most common example of this is where first home buyers get their loving parents to go as guarantors on their home loan. Another example is property investors who partner up with like-minded property investors and pull their resources together in order to buy an investment property. First home buyers can also do this by getting equity from their parents and use the equity as a deposit and pay for stamp duty and closing costs. In the event that you will not qualify for a 10% personal loan with the first strategy, you can do a joint venture with your friends and family and obtain a 10% deposit from them, or a 20% deposit if you don't qualify for lender's mortgage insurance. This can be achieved by legally binding or unsecured or secured personal loan contract. So I would recommend you do this professionally. Don't just say, Mom, can I get 200,000? No. Oh, come on, Mom. I'm not going to blow it. I want to buy a property. It's really good. No. I gave you 1,000 last year, never paid me back. Oh, shit. All right. Now, if that's your approach, forget about it. That's not going to work. You've got to actually approach it like a business person. Because remember, your parents know all the stuff about you if you're approaching your parents, right? They know, they've seen you fail over and over. So you've got to convince them. At the same time, your parents are actually, most parents want to invest, they want to make money. Because most people are excited about making some money or getting involved in something. They just never have opportunities to do it, and they don't trust anyone. So if you approach it with a business proposal, which I'm going to show you at the end how to do that, you're going to succeed. If you approach it with no plan, which is what most people do, you're going to fail from day one. Now, the joint venture equity partner you can use to secure a caveat against the property, and it will be removed once you repay the entire loan plus interest back to them. So basically what happens is, and although all joint ventures come in different shapes and sizes, and there's really no rules for this, guys, you can create any kind of, you can stipulate any terms and conditions in your joint venture that you like, as long as you get a really good property solicitor and an accountant to document the contracts. You can put anything you like in there. And a good accountant and a good property solicitor will guide you through the whole process. And the most important thing is to make sure you document the exit strategy of what happens if someone tries to pull out earlier or wants their money back earlier. What happens? Because you don't want to be in a situation where someone promises you money for 5 or 10 years and then 2 years later they ring you up, say, I want my money back because something's happened. So you've got to have all those conditions covered in your contract as well. Because now, when it comes to world of property investing, they tend to fall into one of the two categories. Joint ventures used to leverage other people's borrowing capacity. So you might have a low income, have a deposit saved, but you just can't borrow enough money. By getting another person to step in or a family member, you can pull their serviceability together and your borrowing capacity as a unit, it goes up in value. The other obvious way is to actually use other people's equity. So you might have a good income, you could definitely service the loan, but you don't have enough deposit. You might need a 10 or 20% deposit plus closing costs and stamp duty. So you can leverage other people's equity. They might have a property with equity locked up inside the property. So how do you structure this? This is the most common way of structuring a joint venture agreement, the ones that we're doing every week with clients. By the way, I'm not giving you recommendations here, and I'm saying this is just one way of doing it. But here you are, and you've got an equity partner and a serviceability partner. So let's say you've got no equity and no serviceability. But you found an equity partner, someone with a lot of equity, could be mum and dad or grandmother, or a serviceability partner, could be someone with very high income. What you do is you become directors of a corporate trustee and you set up a trust. It can be a fixed unit trust or a family trust. You have to get advice from an accountant exactly which structure is relevant for your situation. Now, once you become directors, what happens here is this becomes a separate legal entity. This entity now applies for the loan, and what happens is it's almost like you merge into one being. So all your equity and serviceability gets pooled together. So when this thing applies for a loan, this thing is actually assessed as an individual thing with all these directors going as guarantors. And then the property gets purchased in a corporate trustee and the trust depending on the state that you're living in. So that's a very common structure where you're pulling, in this example, the equity and serviceability of another person. And that entity then buys the property. Now you've got to document how you have the ownership allocated, what happens when you sell the property, who gets the equity, what happens with the tax benefits, how does they get allocated if the property is sold, etc. There's a lot of considerations there, but this is from a high level perspective how these things are structured. Number 3 is 10% vendor finance. A lot of times developers have a lot of money, a lot of cash sitting in a bank account. Now, as you know, inflation is record low at the moment in Australia, 2.1%, 2.2%. The bank swap rate is record low. We have the lowest interest rates historically recorded in Australia at the moment, which means term deposits and savings accounts are paying nothing. So imagine you're a developer, you've got all this cash sitting in the bank earning you 2 or 3% that you're paying tax on. Imagine if someone approaches you and say, would you like to have 10% on your money or 7% on your money? I mean, that's a very, very good proposition for the right person who has a lot of cash, working capital that just sits in the bank account. And this is why vendors and developers and builders sometimes offer vendor finance. And really, in this example, we've done some of these. They're very rare, but they do occur. We've done many of these over the years. When I say many, nothing compared to the volume of normal transactions, but I get about 5, 6, 10 of these a year, every single year from developers and builders that are offering vendor finance. So it's a combination of 10 or 20% vendor finance and 90% or 80% bank loan that can equate to 100% loan to value ratio. And this is probably the easiest way to buy property with no money down and borrow 100% of the total purchase price of the property. This can be achieved by a combination of 10% vendor finance and 90% residential loan equating to 100% of the purchase price. Most vendors will do 20%. Finance. Now, from a banking perspective, some banks will allow you to borrow knowing that it's vendor finance. For some banks, they need a letter from someone saying that it's been a gifted amount of money to you. So you got to speak to the broker around which lender you're borrowing money with and what the rules are around vendor finance. Because a lot of lenders won't accept vendor finance. Some will, some won't. Once again, it's a conversation you have with a good mortgage broker. There are still lenders out there offering 95% LVR plus lenders mortgage insurance capitalised. So vendor finance is known as seller's finance, often referred to by seller as the vendor to finance the sale of real estate to a buyer. This is especially relevant in the market that's going down a little bit because then vendors are more desperate to sell their property. So they've got to get a little bit creative, they will, and this is where you can benefit. More specifically, in this example, the vendor is willing to offer the buyer or purchaser 10 to 20% finance of the valuation of the property. Usually the interest rate is 6%, 7%. We've done them at 8%. Payable monthly in arrears for 12 to 24 months, as long as 5, 6 years is the longest we've done them. So basically you're getting one loan from the developer for the deposit, 20%, and you're paying it over 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever he wants, and you're paying him 6, 7, 8%. And then you're getting the rest from a bank with no lender's mortgage insurance or lender's mortgage insurance. LMI is very difficult in this example. Normally they'll knock it back once they find out there's vendor finance involved. So most of the time you'll be going for 20% vendor finance and 80% from the bank to get 100% finance for the property. So what happens is you've got a property here for 600 grand, you've got vendor interest only loan, and then you've got bank 4% interest. Let's say you're paying 6% interest only to the vendor, 4% to the bank. So the vendor finance is 10% deposit, which is $60,000. And that might be structured over whatever period of time. I mean, there's no rules here. If the vendor needs his money back in 2 years' time, it's 24 months. It could be 5 years. And then you get the residential loan at 540, which is 95%, interest only from the bank at 4%. Now remember, you're paying interest here at 6%, even 8%. People say that's a lot of money to pay, it's a lot of interest to pay. Remember, it's tax deductible for you. And it's only 6 to 8% on a small amount of $60,000. Or you don't get into the property. I mean, it's just the cost of doing business. Both of these combined equate to 100% finance. So you have the investment property. This is basically an example where you do a 20% deposit from the vendor, which is $120,000 against $600,000 purchase, and the rest goes through the bank at $480,000 interest only, which is 80%. Combine the two together, you're getting 100% of the purchase price. Very, very simple strategy. So once again, vendor finance, bank finance. Combine the two, you get 100% finance. So what happens during settlement is you have a residential loan for 10%, vendor finance, you sign a contract, set up your trust if you like, then the money travels to the developer at settlement, and then he gets 100% of his money at the end. So the main thing about the developers, especially the big corporate ones, is they have no emotion in this equation. They're not mum and dad developers. They don't need to squeeze every cent out of the transaction. All they want is 100% of the money. If they got to get creative along the way, they will, as long as they're the right person and as long as you have the right conversation with them. So to do this, to pull this off, you need a team of experts, which is super important. You can't do this yourself if you've never done vendor finance or if you've never done a joint venture agreement. You're going to fail. Who do you need? You need a good property accountant. You got a really good property solicitor, a mortgage broker, and a property sourcing specialist if you need help with sourcing the properties, which is myself. If you don't need the property and you've got one already that you want to buy, you just need these three here. And you've got to have a conversation with them. Part of the conversation is how many joint ventures have you done in the past? I mean, if the lawyer's never done a joint venture, the accountant doesn't know what you're talking about, you're dealing with the wrong people. My accountant does hundreds of joint ventures every year through trusts between developers and buyers. My accountant does hundreds per year in terms of joint ventures and vendor finance and a lot of other creative stuff. So you've got to get the right property accountant, the right property solicitor, and the mortgage broker. You need to create a compelling case to invest in you first before they invest in the business plan. So you've got to create a comprehensive business plan that sells not only the opportunity, but your expertise and your team. See, this is how you get through to your parents. If you just say, Mom, can I get 200 grand? No, go away. All right. Ask Dad. Dad, can I get 200 grand? No. What did your mum say? No. That's what usually happens, right? There's no team, no strategy, nothing. Even if they don't trust you, and most parents don't trust their kids, right? Or they trust their kids to some extent, but they know all the stuff they've done wrong in the past. If you sell yourself and the team behind you and the property opportunity and you present it the right way, I'll tell you now, there'll be a strike rate of 90 or 80% in most case scenarios. Most people fail with joint ventures because they just don't know how to present them correctly to their family. So you must make it a win-win, no-brainer, and give personal guarantees against all losses. You've got to take the risk out of the equation completely. Okay? Now, your business plan must include the following as a bare minimum in order to present the information to your family. So you've got to sit down with your mum and dad or your grandmother or your aunt and say, I've got a business proposal that I want to show you. And I just want you to give me half an hour of your time. There's absolutely no obligation, but I just want you to hear me out because it's a massive opportunity. And I've done a lot of research on this, and I've also got a team behind me that can support me. Now, this is what you need to present to them. Number one, you need a written loan approval subject to joint venture finance from a mortgage broker. So you need to have a funding proposal in writing saying if you can get the equity, let's say you're going for equity from your parents, you've got to have a pre-approval that you can actually buy these properties. So let's say you're buying a $500,000 townhouse somewhere in Glenroy, okay, and you need 10% deposit and closing costs. So you need $80,000. You've got enough income to service the debt. You just don't have the deposit and closing costs. You've got to have the pre-approval already in writing saying as long as you come up with the $80,000 deposit, you can get the loan. So your parents will know, or your grandmother, or whoever your joint venture prospect is, that you can definitely get the loan as long as they come to the party with the deposit. Then you've got to have a property investment analysis report, a PIA report. Okay, you can Google this if you don't know what it is, on the property itself and show them that you can maintain this property with your income, that the property is cash flow neutral, cash flow positive, whatever, or cash flow negative, but you can definitely make the repayments on the property. That gives them the certainty that once you buy this property, you're not going to go bankrupt and lose the property and they'll lose their money. So they've got to have certainty you can, number one, hold on to the property. Number two, they'll get their money back as well with interest. Because remember, the only reason they're giving you money is because they want to get their money back with interest. That's what a joint venture is. They're not doing you a favor. You know, they actually want their money back with interest. You've got to have an extensive property due diligence and research report on the property. Now you can buy these online. Most developers will give you one they've created. If you're buying through companies like myself, through Investors Prime Real Estate, every project we've got due diligence kits on the project. You can download some of these from our website as well, especially if you go to Box Hill or Bentley, download the research kit. It gives an example of what it is. It's like a 20-page report on the area, demographics, capital growth history, schools, amenities, all the fundamentals of the area. Then you need to get an RP Data suburb report, which you can buy for like $30 on RP Data on the suburb, the history of the suburb, all the sales in the last 6 months, and it gives you long-term history, demographics, income, who lives there, what's happening in the area. And also I would go to Henry Todd White Valuers and buy a suburb report from the biggest valuation company in Australia. So you've got 2 reports backing up the fundamentals of the suburb beyond the property. The due diligence case, by the way, is mainly on the property itself. The street, the townhouse, configuration, layout, plans, everything. In that report, by the way, it covers things like builder, developer, architect. So you got to sell that, not only, if you're buying an off-the-plan property, for example, you got to sell, well, the architect is this company here, the builder is this company here, the developer is this company here, and this is the track record they have. Then you got to have a statement of advice from a financial planner who basically is pro-property. And I've got a financial planner that's a pro-property guy, and he's happy to do statements of advice around property accumulation. Now, this is not a prerequisite, but it's important if you can get one. And then you've got to get a letter from the accountant showing cash flow analysis on the property in question. So the PIA report will cover some of this, but you've got to get a letter from the accountant saying, so-and-so is about to buy property, based on their income, this is the outcome of cash flow by holding this property. Now, once you get all this information, plus personal financials and personal guarantees, you can start presenting the opportunity to your parents or joint venture partner as a real business proposal, because ultimately, and beyond this, the obvious thing is you've got to get a joint venture contract, which actually outlines the original loan, the terms and conditions of the loan, when they're going to get the principal back, and when the interest will be paid back. If you come with all this information to your parents, and you sit them down and you show them how they can get 6-7% return on their money with no risk, and you've done all this research, why wouldn't they give it to you? You know, I mean, what else are they going to do? Have it locked up in equity or having it in a term deposit? I guarantee you, if you present the information properly, and you can spend hours with your accountant and lawyer and mortgage broker trying to understand all this, it's going to be the best use of your time ever, because you've only got to do this once to get started. So once you get into your first property, which is what the objective of this video is, you're done, you're in the market. The hardest thing is to get the first one, and most people never start, or they keep delaying and it's too late to get into the market. So you've only got to do this once, guys. If you really focus on this for 2 or 3 months and get all the information together perfectly, read the information, have complete ownership over the information, and then sit your family down or your joint venture partner and present it to them with the whole team in the way that I laid out just there, you're going to have a very good strike rate. You know, and I've seen people do this with parents and family, and the obvious answer at the end is, yes, let's do it. You've taken the risk out of the whole thing, why wouldn't we do it? So, if you enjoyed the video, I hope you have, and I hope I've given you some tools and some key distinctions of how you can get into the property market. You might be wondering, what's the next step? How do I learn more? How do I learn on how to build and structure a large property portfolio to replace my income? I want to personally invite you to an up-and-coming real estate investing fast-track weekend. And all you got to do is scroll down below. There's a link to click, or you can just go into the realestatefasttrack.com.au website and register yourself. I'm running one of these every 6 weeks or 7 weeks in Melbourne. It's a 2-day event. Day 1 is property finance and due diligence, and it's literally all just contents. We talk about how to structure your property portfolio correctly and how to replace your income, how to pay for your mortgage in record time. Day 2, we put you on the bus and we actually do real research in the market, looking at real projects and suburbs. It's an amazing 2-day event. It's very exclusive and limited to only 40 people, mainly because the seminar room in my office is only made for 50 people and the bus has only 44 seats. The speakers are Stephen Molnar, who's an investment and property specialist, Cameron Fisher from Changing Places Real Estate. Cameron's a registered valuer. He's also director of buymyplace.com.au, which is a publicly listed company, and the director of Changing Places Real Estate. He's been in real estate for over 30 years, has done over 5,000 successful auctions. And also Stephen McClutchy from Loans Australia. Stephen has been in lending for 20 years plus. He's settled over $1 billion of loans, which is unheard of in the industry. And of course myself, as the CEO of Investors Prime Real Estate. So 2 days 4 speakers, a lot of contents. Check out the dates below or click the link and register yourself. Also, if you want to grab a copy of my book, just go into bookonfinance.com.au or Amazon or any good bookshop out there in Australia. They've all got my book, Property Finance Made Simple. Very relevant for today's times, especially for those who want to get in the market, but you feel like you don't understand how lending works, or you're getting kicked back by, virtually all the lenders. There's a chapter there of, 18 ways to boost your borrowing capacity. That chapter there by itself is worth the $30 you pay for the book, because I have a lot of emails and testimonials from clients who just picked up one distinction in that chapter, and that one distinction got them the loan, and it made all the difference in their life. So definitely worth reading. By the way, as a special bonus for sticking to the very end of this video, I want to give you access to my online home study, valued at $497, free, no strings attached. You can just watch it immediately, and there's nothing to buy, by the way. There's nothing there's no upselling with this home study. It's all there is, and it's free access instantly, absolutely free, and it's super easy to navigate through. Once you go into the main homepage, you just click on the video, and you just watch it basically, and then you can download the brochure, which is a manual, I should say, which has all the PowerPoint slides as well. That is absolutely free and it's instant access. Scroll down below, there's a link where you can click onto the home study and you can gain access to it pretty much immediately. And that home study you used to sell for $497. It's 10 hours of video plus 265 pages of PowerPoint slides, which is used in the video. Yours absolutely free to enjoy and learn. Guys, it's been a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I want to thank you for staying to the very end, and I hope you become successful in property investing. And hey, if you do, if I've inspired you or if you've learned anything in this video that made a difference to you and you get a really good result, please email me. I love to hear success stories from some of my YouTube subscribers to see if I'm making impact in anyone's life. That's a really good way that I get feedback from my clients and my YouTube video subscribers. So thank you once again. It's been a pleasure. This is Konrad Bobilak, and I'll see you on the inside.